My name is Mara Webster, and I'm your host here today at SAG-AFTRA Foundation, where we are joined by the wonderfully talented Dane DeHaan, who is currently starring as Chris Linwood in the show 000, which is on Amazon Prime, where he's part of the Linwood family alongside Gabriel Byrne and Andrea Riseborough, where we follow the entire shipment of cocaine, whether it's with the Mexican cartels or the Italian crime syndicate, in a story which really captures the humanity of this entire industry on a very personal level through their performances. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dane.
Thanks for having me.
And as you may notice, this is our first non-audience Q&A that you're joining us for.
Yeah, there's no one here. So.
Well, thank you for still making the time to come out today. I wanted to start by asking about how much access you had to all of the scripts, because it was a miniseries versus traditional TV. Had they written the entire show when you first considered signing on?
They had not written the entire thing. They had like rough drafts of, I feel like maybe the first 5 episodes, which even those, they were a little hesitant to send me all of them. But my storyline does really kind of accelerate as the series goes along. So I think initially they only sent me the first 2, with the promise that more would happen, you know, but it's like, I didn't necessarily trust them. So I was like, no, I need to see like a little bit more of what happens. So I think I ended up getting like 4 or 5 episodes to see like the general themes of what was going to happen in the series.
And given that it's the same creative team that were working on Gomorrah previously, which was a movie and then also a TV series, did you have familiarity with that content? Because the tone feels very much in line with all of that.
Yeah, they weren't responsible for the movie. Yeah. I loved the movie, but that wasn't Stefano. Stefano directed the whole TV series of Gomorrah. I wasn't familiar with the TV series, but I watched like 3 episodes of Gomorrah. He did a movie. He did this Italian movie, Sabora. I watched that just to like get his general like tone and vibe. And you know, he was only one of 3 directors we had, but he was the only one signed up at the time, and it was definitely a good indication that, you know, he was very capable.
I was also interested in if you had any access to Roberto Saviano, because he obviously wrote the book that this is based in, but since he wrote the book for Gomorrah, he's been under a lot of police protection because of the writing that he's doing and the things that he's outing within this industry.
Yeah, he wasn't around for the shooting of it, but he was there in Venice for the premiere at the Venice Film Festival, and he definitely is a well-protected individual. I think because he writes about such dangerous things and like that kind of stuff. So I read the book. Our storyline isn't really involved in the book. It doesn't really talk about an American side of the cocaine trade within the book. So our entire storyline was pretty fictionalized. But I did meet him in Venice, and he does come with quite a security detail. And yeah, I didn't necessarily feel safe around him because there's so many people around him making him safe, which just feels like maybe it's because you're in danger when you're around him. You know, he definitely, you feel it for sure. Yeah.
What was some of the research then that you did on, you know, the entire cocaine industry, but also the way that your family would be involved in it that was really valuable for you from a performance perspective?
Well, I think, you know, I trusted in the script with everything that happens in terms of like the cocaine trade and stuff like that. I think what we do in the script is pretty clear. Our role in it is pretty clear. You know, we're a shipping family. We broker the shipments. We're aware of what's on our boats. That part of it wasn't necessarily what needed the research. For me, for my character, it was more about researching the Huntington's disease. My character has Huntington's disease. It's this genetic degenerative disease. And for me, that's what was important, is that was conveyed truthfully, and, you know, that I did justice to that. 'Cause that is really such a part of Chris's personal journey. And then everything that happens around it, you know, it's more like plot points, and it's very exciting and crazy, but it's already in there, and you just trust that the people that are writing it know what they're talking about. You know? Yeah.
And you play his journey with Huntington's really beautifully and really sensitively. How did you navigate figuring out what the different beats of it were going to be? Because even just within these 8 episodes, we see him gradually being more affected by it each moment.
Yeah, it became, it really did become something I became very protective over, and I wanted it to be conveyed as truthfully and accurately as possible. And I had ended up doing so much research on the disease that in the end I felt like within the set, like I kind of was the authority on it because I knew the most about it. So I did end up, especially towards the end, the things that happened to him were oftentimes changes that I made to the script, just so that I knew they wanted something big to happen, but I knew it had to be truthful within the symptoms of Huntington's, you know? Yeah. So I remember there was a scene where like he woke up, I think because he was spasming in his sleep, and then he like didn't know where he was or what was going on. But if you have Huntington's, you don't have the spasms in your sleep. No one knows why, but you don't. And also like forgetting what's going on isn't really a symptom either. So that's what I changed to him having this like kind of intense emotional outburst, because intense emotional outbursts that seemingly come out of nowhere are a symptom of Huntington's, you know.
It also feels in general like through your performance, you're really keeping it about his emotional core and his humanity. Obviously he has Huntington's, but that's a part of his character, not the central piece that you're playing. Was that something that was really important to you?
Yeah, it's one thing I really loved about the series is that you have a character with a disease, but it's not about a character. It's not like, oh, the movie about the guy with Huntington's disease and how he degenerates. You know, I think it was really beautifully interwoven into the storyline that it's one of the many conflicts he has as all this crazy stuff is happening, you know? Yeah.
I also really enjoy watching the sibling relationship between you and Andrea Riseborough, who plays Emma, your sister. And I love it all down to the details of the way that you physically mess with each other and touch each other. It feels very natural as someone who has a brother as well. I recognized a lot of that. And I was curious about the conversations that the two of you had and the way that you navigated figuring out what those details and those rhythms would be.
I think a lot of the stuff you're talking about, like the tickling and like that kind of stuff, was more stuff that came in the moment, you know? The relationship it's written really well in the script. You know, it's very, you understand it. You understand that she's the eldest and she's being groomed to take over the family business, that I'm the youngest and I kind of live in her shadow, and, you know, I'm treated like this fragile bird, and I'm like in a way jealous of her, but there's still love between us, and we love our father and we love our mother, and our family's very tight-knit. I think all of that is very much in the script. And so, you know, Andrea's an amazing actress, and she's classically trained, and she does all her work and all her research. So she showed up to set with this full life already having been created. And then it was just about in the moment what was happening. You know, I mean, like the tickling and the like brotherly, sisterly stuff wasn't necessarily in the script again, but like at the end of the scene, it just seemed like the natural thing to do. So that just went with having an actress in the scene with me that I could trust, you know? Yeah.
And Gabriel Byrne, who plays your father, is an actor who very often likes to have a lot of discussion and ask a lot of questions around the script and around character and moments. And I was interested if that was something that he was doing on this production, and if that's something that you enjoy engaging in as well, and if that's helpful to your process.
Yeah, we did have some time to do that, especially for the first 2 episodes that Stefano directed. You know, we had some time like around the table in New Orleans to pick it apart and think about the characters, and there were always, all along, those conversations did continue to happen. But Gabriel is certainly someone that, you know, cares about his character, the role in it, and what he would actually be doing, and isn't afraid to question the reality or truth of a situation, for sure. I think, but that's true with Andrea, and that's true with me too. And that's, you know, when you're making a series that, like, one of the initial things they say to you is, oh, we want it to be really realistic, then I think it becomes your job as an actor to make sure they're living up to that, you know? Yeah.
And the three of you all had a lot of time in New Orleans before you started shooting to prepare. What were some of the most valuable choices and decisions that came out of that time together?
That's a good question. You know, we had a lot of discussion together about just the Linwoods in general, our history, our past, how long we've been in New Orleans, like, why are we a shipping family? How, you know, just like the whole lineage of it. You know, I think that was really interesting. Really just, you know, Gabriel obviously is Irish and Andrea is British. So there were a lot of conversations about like what we're going to sound like that I think was important. to have, and just general discussions about family dynamic. I think that those conversations were, I guess, the most helpful while we were around the table. And then it just became going scene through scene and, you know, seeing what felt right and what didn't.
And I know that Stefano describes his role as a showrunner, but in an Italian sense versus an American sense, in that the directors have a lot more autonomy and creative freedom with what they're doing. So how did that shift working with each of the different directors across all the episodes?
Yeah, well, it was definitely very much a director's show. I think all the directors hopefully felt like they had a lot of, like you said, like autonomy, and their creative vision was many times put in the forefront of what we were doing, you know, whether it be Stefano, our other director was Janus Metz, and Pablo Trapero. You know, it was always their episodes. It's a very filmmaker driven show, and they had really like a lot of control over what they were doing, for sure. You know, we were all there for them, for sure.
And then you were also filming over the course of an entire year in 6 different countries across 3 different continents.
Yeah.
What were some of the unique challenges of that scope of work?
Well, you know, so much happens on the show. A lot of exciting stuff, a lot of dangerous stuff, and a lot of unpredictable stuff. And I think those 3 words, exciting, dangerous, and unpredictable, are pretty good description of what like day-to-day shooting was like. You know, you're on a different location week by week in a strange place, with some of the same film crew, but some different film crew. And there's just like, you know, there's things that are completely out of your control, of like, whether it be food poisoning or, you know, dust storms. I'd never experienced a dust storm. Those are pretty crazy. You know, like just like things that go along with being in foreign, strange, you know, isolated locations that people don't usually shoot at or go to. Every location had a huge set of obstacles, and every day was different and unpredictable in that way. Yeah.
What was the biggest obstacle that you felt like you had to overcome in terms of your personal performance in the show?
Again, like I think it was the Huntingtons, and making sure that it was accurately portrayed and not the forefront of what was going on, you know, making sure I understood it enough that I could just kind of like be a part of what was going on, but didn't take the focus away from the actual, you know, true plot of the story.
Yeah. And even though it's not a typical action series, there's a lot of action moments within it. So what were some of the unique challenges or new aspects of craft in working on a lot of those scenes?
Yeah, well, it's all very different too, but like, you know, it's, in a way, it can be like terrifying to be like on this giant shipping boat in the middle of the ocean and like be told, okay, this is the scene where like the helicopter lands like right next to you, and you're like, what? What do you mean? Like, aren't we doing that like in a studio and the helicopter is gonna be fake? It's like, no, like that's gonna be real too, you know? So the action of it, again, it's all different. It's all different directors, different situations, and it became just about understanding on that day what the exact challenge was going to be, you know? Yeah.
There's also a really interesting element in your performance because you're playing a character who has been kept out of the family business and for the first time is getting to step up and be part of it and be put into these very dangerous situations. So how did you navigate the way that you wanted to perform someone who's really finding their feet in that side of their life for the first time?
I don't know. I mean, again, a lot of that was just in there, you know, like a lot of that just happens to be with having good writing and understanding the circumstance and then believing it and letting it fly, you know, like Chris's journey in the series is, you know, the arc of it and understanding the arc of it. It's there, and it's more about just bringing it to life and like just completely understanding what's happening in that moment and believing it and then letting it fly, you know? Yeah.
How did you personally set about thinking about the relationship between him and his mother? Because we learned that his mother died when he was very young and also had Huntington's disease. So he's seen the effect of it. And she feels like a very present character, even though she's not someone who's on screen in the show.
Yeah, I think she is. Again, just kind of like understanding Huntington's and thinking about it, and not only understanding the physical parts of it and the symptoms, physical symptoms of it, but also the mental impact it has on people and on a family. I think one thing that is very devastating about any family that the mother or father has Huntington's is you've seen them die. Yeah. You've seen how they die. You've seen them degenerate. You've seen them, you've seen it. So whether you have it or not, that's a possibility. And in Chris's case, where basically when you turn 18, you're given the choice of taking a test. And then yes, you have it, and this is how you're going to die, or no, you don't. And so for Chris, he knows he has it, and he knows this is how he's going to die. And he's already experienced the trauma of seeing his mother die from this disease. And now he knows that that's how he's going to go. And then the other side of that, given the family dynamic, is the people that take the test and find out they don't have it. A lot of them feel an intense amount of guilt because they've seen their parent die from it. They know maybe their sibling has it and how their sibling's going to die. And it's not just, oh, I'm so lucky I don't have it, but it's why am I the one that doesn't have it? Why is he the one that has it? So it really is, there's a really complicated mental aspect of it. And I think that's generally the mother's role, is that we all obviously love everyone in our family. The Linwoods love each other so much, and it was such a devastating loss. And, and Chris saw that happen firsthand, and Chris knows how he's going to go. And, I think that's a very powerful thing in Chris's life. Yeah.
And overall, it's such a huge cast, and there's a lot of ensemble players in it. Does that change the dynamic on set and the camaraderie that exists amongst everyone in the cast?
Yeah, for sure. Because, we all have our own storylines. So the most consistent thing in this year of shooting all around the world were the makeup people, the hair people, the costume person. These are the people that were with us all through it. That was where I found most of my camaraderie. Is the people that were kind of within my aspect of the world, but we all had our own individual journeys. I have certain scenes with some of the Italian actors, very few scenes, but some scenes with some of the Mexican actors. And, Andrea and I have a good amount of stuff together, but we also have our own individual journeys as well. So we all had our own adventure on this.
How would you set about navigating your performance in scenes where someone's speaking a totally different language to you, but you're still reacting to it as an actor and a scene partner?
Yeah, well, I think unlike Andrea, who her character speaks a lot of the languages, I maybe made the easier choice of Chris doesn't speak any other languages, which also kept in line with the fact that he's kept at home, and he's he doesn't do much, and he smokes a lot of pot, and he gardens. And so I didn't really feel like I was a great linguist. I didn't know a lot of different languages. So a lot of it just became about, again, being in that situation. Oh, these guys that speak Italian are coming into my house and yelling at me. And I know basically what it has to do with, but I don't know what exactly they're saying. And so the danger and the fear of that situation, a lot of it comes out of the unknown and just kind of guessing what they're doing and saying,
And then as you're playing Chris throughout all of the episodes and playing him for this extended period of time, were there things that you learned and gradually uncovered and understood about him as you lived in that character for so much longer than normal?
Yeah, sure. I think, it was the first limited series I had done in a long time, and I definitely had a feeling that I knew this guy better than if I were just making one episode or a movie about him. I didn't just know Chris for a section of his life, for a 2-hour tale of his life, but I really felt after a year of living in his shoes that I really understood him, and he really became a part of me. And I think I understood really how selfless he is, and how with his disease and with his family's business and with everything that's going on, that his decisions come from a place of knowing that his time on earth is limited, but knowing that his family's legacy and business has a chance of lasting forever and having a huge impact on the world, and him learning how to put that in front of himself. Yeah.
And the first time you were playing an extended arc with a character was actually when you were on In Treatment. I think you were in about 7 episodes.
Yeah.
And at that point in your career, what were some of the unique things that you had to learn about continuing to develop and evolve a character over time in that way?
Well, like everything, you know. I hadn't really done more than 1 episode of television when I did In Treatment. I had done a lot of theater, you know, and I remember theater. I'd been maybe out of theater school for a year or two when I got that opportunity. And I remember being on set and people being like, oh, this is a lot like a play. This is a lot like a play, because it's like a 2-handed dialogue between 2 people. And I see what they're saying now, but at the time I was like, this is nothing like a play. But I also had this like a lot of, in the beginning of my career and like film wise especially, I feel like I had this like naive, blind ambition that I think kind of fueled and helped my career, because I didn't realize that like shooting 14 pages of dialogue a day is crazy. And, you know, like these kind of things that like I wasn't like, I was just like excited at the opportunity. I was excited about having this dialogue, and I was working certainly faster than I'd ever had to work before, because plays you get rehearsal and weeks of rehearsal, and in Treatment you get like maybe 2 days of rehearsal. And I think what was amazing about that experience for me, and what really made it successful for me, again, was having Gabriel Byrne sitting across from me and really listening to me, you know, like taking time and taking me as a young actor seriously and making sure he was there for me. And I really felt like he cared for me, and everything I was saying he was reacting off of. And, you know, looking back on it, like that was such a challenging job. Gabriel's role in that was such a challenging job for any actor. He was shooting 3 episodes a week, probably, of 30. So he was shooting 90 pages a week, in which he has like every other line, you know. And then like, even if in our episodes a lot of times he's saying like, how does that make you feel, he's still like going to therapy at the end, and he's like keeping the storyline. But he was, I feel like it would have been so easy for a seasoned actor to check out when it wasn't their turn because of the amount of responsibility. But looking back and seeing how there he was for me, how much he cared for me on screen and off, and the advice he gave me, and it was just like he made that successful for me for sure. And it was cool to be back with him for this for sure. Yeah.
And given that he is someone who's been very open with his knowledge and experience and advice with you, what are some of the details and really valuable things that he's taught you about your craft as an actor?
Well, he taught me to take chances. You know, he taught me to trust in myself and take chances and really listen to myself. And I think, like you said, he is very vocal about the truth of a situation, and he's not afraid to question what's going on within a scenario or in a scene. And he's a really smart person. You know, I think he's taught me to be informed. I remember, and also like little things. I remember like doing a take in Treatment, and like the director Paris Barkley coming up to me and being like, "Oh, that was so like good or amazing," or giving me a compliment, and me like as a young insecure actor being like, "I don't want to hear that right now. I don't want to hear that." And I remember Gabriel looking at me and being like, "You know, it'd be a lot easier if you just said thank you." You know, and that was honestly like, that was such amazing advice, because like then you say thank you and then like it goes away, and then you can continue to focus on your work. And so you're not building this like personal, emotional insecurity that's going to get in the way of your work. You're letting a moment happen. You're finding the easiest way back into the work. And he just makes it all about the work in such an awesome way. Yeah.
One of the other TV shows that you did earlier in your career as well was obviously on True Blood, in which I think there's an interesting challenge to that performance, because it's very heightened situations, and even the characters are, but you still have to make sure it's grounded in an emotional core. So how did you navigate or learn that specific skill of acting?
I don't know. I just wasn't on True Blood that much, honestly. Like I did maybe like 3 episodes of it. It was like pretty the stuff I remember doing was like eating squirrel guts and like I did like a lot of like really weird things. And I was really just kind of excited to be there because I had just moved to LA. It was after In Treatment. I just moved to LA and it just like felt cool to be invited into the show that I had like watched and stuff like that. But I don't know that I have like knowledgeable input on my like artistic process of In Treatment, honestly. Yeah.
And when you shot the movie Life with Anton Corbijn, obviously his background is as a photographer, but he's made several features now. And I was interested in his directing style and if there's anything really interesting stylistically that comes from that background as a photographer for him.
Yeah, he is very careful in his compositions. A lot of times it felt like he was like the greatest collaboration he was having was with the DP. And the amount of, it was a fairly simple movie, independent movie, not a huge budget, but he still always made sure he had the time to like help create a beautiful image, which was interesting. He also, he really saw that movie through the lens, for lack of a better word, of like Rob Pattinson's character of the photographer. I think he was like more familiar with Dennis Stock than he was James Dean, which was interesting and cool and kind of like the way it should be for that movie, yeah, and it was really interesting. It was a really interesting collaboration, and I've certainly gotten pretty close with Anton since then, and I would be interested in working with him again. I think especially because I more understand the way that he works, you know what I mean?
And you also had the opportunity to work with Steven Spielberg on Lincoln.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about him as a director is he's very curious even when he's filming and he loves to discover things within the moment. Did you get to have that experience at all as an actor on set with him?
I didn't, honestly. I was there for like one night, 2 nights. I'm in the very opening scene and there was like a whole cavalry of people and rain machines and horses and just like madness. I feel like I remember he was very kind and nice. Remember I was taken to meet him and he was like eating a bunch of like cheese poofs and he the first words he ever spoke to me were he was like looking at the like nutritional facts of the cheese balls, and he like looked up at me and he went, "Only 6 grams of fat and 32 balls," which I'll never forget because it was really strange, and that was my first interaction with Steven Spielberg. But then, like within the context of the day, it became about like, like, can you say that a little faster? Like I didn't have a big enough role within that film that I had like this great collaboration. You could see this collaboration going on between Daniel Day-Lewis and Steven Spielberg, and that was amazing just to watch. But my role within that was like, can you hit the mark and like say that a little faster,
And when you were shooting Valerian, obviously there's a very raw element to performing because you're doing a lot of green screen, a lot of effects, and you're acting against a lot of things that aren't there. Is there an element of that really brings you back to what made you fall in love with in the first place when you were younger as a child? Because that's where everybody starts as an actor, is just from pure imagination.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you need imagination, and you need to, it's hard. Acting in a green screen or a blue screen it's really challenging. And all you have is your imagination. Or sometimes you don't even have that. Like, some of the shots are so epic and in such a crazy world and like, but also so short that like, it's hard sometimes to understand exactly what's going on, honestly. And like, then you really have to just trust in the filmmaker, in Luke, to be like, trust me, just like, look around like you're like really amazed, because if you don't have enough reference or the shot is so short or like the context of what you're looking at isn't yet specific, then all you really have is to trust in the filmmaker. But when it's not that, then it is imagination for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I also know for all actors that auditioning can feel very daunting and very challenging. And I was interested if there's things that you've developed for yourself in terms of a mindset or an approach or anything that you like to do to feel really comfortable once you finally walk into that room.
Yeah. Well, I don't audition much anymore, but I auditioned a lot when I first got here. And I think, my advice is it's important to do as much work on it as possible, but that in my opinion, that work is not memorizing the lines. I think you need to understand what you're doing. You need to understand who you're talking to. You need to like read those pages so much that they become a part of you. And then it's the same in the work I do in film a lot of time. And then like what happens when you do all that work is eventually you know the material, but I would never not have pages in my hand when I did an audition. I think that's important because you don't want to have like, what if you forget and then everything goes wrong? And I think again, like I had this real like blind ambition when I first moved to New York City, where I just thought it was like this wonderful equal playing field in which like the person that did the best audition got the job. And I know that's not necessarily true anymore, and I've learned what this business is, but I always said to myself as a young actor going into any opportunity, like, why not me? And I think that's true. Like, this is your opportunity to show people like that you can really have a handle on this material, and you're an actor and you know what you're doing, and like, why not you? Because it could be. And like, in a way I was right as a young actor, because I had all these amazing opportunities happen for me, and maybe that did come from this feeling of like, well, why not me? Like, I can give a good audition. Somebody's going to play this part. Why can't it be me?
Well, I'm glad that it was you a lot of the time.
Thanks, me too.
Going back to 000, is there an aspect of your craft that you feel like you really learned more about through the process of making this series?
I think, well, every project has its own set of challenges. I think what became most important in 000 is understanding and having a real confidence in the point of view of my character and what my character is going through. Maybe that was also a consequence of the episodic nature of it, and the 3 different directors. Is like, your role not only becomes playing your role, but it becomes understanding it and standing up for Chris in situations that don't necessarily feel right, and then like, it's a good thing to have those opinions, and it's a good thing to want to stand up for your part of the series, because that's where great collaboration comes from, even if it can get maybe at times it feels inconvenient for people, or maybe at times it feels like tense because you're speaking up for your side of the story. But what comes out of that is a more whole and interesting storyline. And I think that's one thing that became really important during this process, was just like sticking up for myself and sticking up for Chris as a character in the series.
Well, you can catch all episodes of 000 on Amazon Prime now. And thank you so much for coming out this afternoon, Dane.
You can. And it's a really good time to stream television. I think it's important to say.
The best time.
That's right.